Hey everybody, welcome to the Diabetes Empowerment Summit. I am your co-host and founder, Danielle Hargenrader, as well as founder of Diabetes Dominator Coaching and Love Yourself to Health monthly coaching membership. I am here with another amazing guest. I'm going to read you her bio really quickly because I just want to get right into the story. So Tiara is a health and wellness blogger, diabetes advocate, and nutrition educator who was misdiagnosed with type 2 diabetes in 2017 and re-diagnosed with LADA or LADA diabetes in 2020. She's passionate about cooking with fresh ingredients, body positivity, and advocating for women of color within the health and wellness space. She enjoys sharing her journey on her blog, Cooking to a T, and is also the project manager of Beyond Type 2, a platform of the global nonprofit Beyond Type 1. Tiara, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm very excited to talk to you about all things food and diabetes and everything else. How are you?
I'm good, Danielle. How are you? Thank you so much for having me on. I'm so excited to chat with you.
Oh, good. I'm very excited that you're excited because we were just talking offline for a second, and I know that this is going to be great. So in your bio, we talk a little bit in the beginning about the misdiagnosis, which we talked about as kind of a thematic thing we're finding throughout the people we're interviewing for the summit and in general. So just talk about a little bit about that, and then we'll kind of foray into how you manage your diabetes regardless of diagnosis with your relationship with food and how you relate to it.
Yeah, so as you just read, I was misdiagnosed with type 2 diabetes. I was originally diagnosed in 2017, so I actually just celebrated my first diaversary last week. And when I think about like my diagnosis, I wasn't tested for type 1. I was given the pamphlets like most people with type 2 are given, and I was told to eat healthier, but I was studying nutrition education at the time, so I already knew how to eat healthier, and I had already been eating healthy for so long. And it wasn't until a little over a year ago when an endocrinologist who I started seeing, she asked me, she was like, what were your symptoms again? And what were you doing? And I said, yeah, I was always working out. I lost a bunch of weight, and then I got diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. And she said, I feel like you actually may have type 1. And she said, okay, come into the office and we'll, do some blood work. And lo and behold, I have a lot of diabetes. And also I just, want to make sure that, you can still work out and live healthy and still get type 2. So want to make sure that doesn't sound Jamie, because I'm not. But the assumption that I just had type 2 and they sent me on my way, when I realized that how deadly that can be, the deadly consequences when it comes to misdiagnosis, it made me frustrated and upset, and made me wonder how many other people who are diagnosed with type 2 diabetes don't have the right diagnosis. And I do feel like a lot of that is rooted in the stigma surrounding type 2 and who is disproportionately affected by type 2, and also the lack of initiative taken by healthcare providers, and possibly even just a lack of training for primary care physicians who don't know a lot about diabetes. They just know type 1, type 2, and like what the general symptoms are, and then they diagnose you and move and put you on your merry way. And I feel like there just needs to be more awareness about that, and also to help people who are diagnosed with type 2 or feel like they're at risk to ask the questions to just rule out the fact that, you may not have type 1 because there's no harm in knowing. And if you have type 2, that's, I'm so sorry. It's still sad because diabetes sucks in general, but like if you have type 2, you at least know how it's going to be treated. You know that you can be directed to the right medications. You know that you can be directed towards a diabetes education specialist. You know where to go and how to move forward with that. But if you are wandering around and you're being treated as a type 2 when you actually have type 1, that has deadly consequences if you go into DKA. So there really needs to be more awareness on both fronts about type 1 and type 2 and misdiagnosis, but also like just why it happens so often.
Absolutely. And like you said, the stigma is such a big part of it. And having coached so many people, we talked about this a little bit as well, is just, and I don't like to make light of how things are simple, but I mean, the reality of confirming a diagnosis of diabetes in the type is as simple as 2 extra vials of blood, 2 extra check marks on a piece of paperwork that the doctor has the autonomy to check off. And as much as I want to give people the benefit of the doubt, which I do, but I also think as a medical professional, when people are coming to you, even if you don't know all of the nuances about managing diabetes, I don't like the word should because it's filled with judgment, but I think if you are in that position and you're putting yourself in that position, you should know how to confirm a disease. Right. That's just like kind of 101 stuff. And just you said stigma about age, about race, about weight, about all of these things, and they just visually take that in and they say, oh, well, clearly you're this. And not only is that negligent, like you said, it's deadly. And so right. I'm really glad you had a doctor that was willing to see with more than her eyes about what was going on.
Exactly. And it was just her just asking just a couple of questions, like just her like kind of inquiring about my history. And, you know, I think when looking back on it, I think my primary care physician who diagnosed me with type 2, I think he thought he was doing the best that he could at the time. I think when it comes to seeing a PCP, you don't have a lot of time. Like I had about like 10 minutes like per appointment to really learn about the disease and like get the basics and be prescribed my insulin, be put on my merry way, but that's not enough time. And it's not fair to any patient with diabetes type 1 or type 2, but especially like with a disease that is stigmatized like type 2, it's just not fair. And everyone should be able to get the right diagnosis so that they know how to move forward with their treatment. I
could not agree more with you. And so kind of in that light, so both of us have degrees in nutrition science, which I think are, you know, nutritional degrees, which I love. We were talking offline about relationships with nutrition and how deeply that influences our relationship with how we manage our diabetes, and I think a lot of other aspects of life as well. So really kind of for my own curiosity, like how did you decide that that's what you wanted to go to school for? Like what set you off on that path?
So I was actually, I had pre-diabetes when I was 18. Okay. I've always had issues with my weight. I've had issues with my weight since I was like 11. And with breath in that, I was a kid in middle school who unfortunately had stretch marks on her shoulders and started getting it like pretty much everywhere. And so my relationship with food really developed when I was a child. Yes. And it played such a big role in my life. And it wasn't until shortly after my 21st birthday where I looked at myself in the mirror. I was on vacation with my mom in Vegas, and we were about to go out, and I had on this like bright green shirt and a really nice navy blue blazer. And I looked at myself in the mirror and I realized I couldn't suck in my stomach anymore. Like if I tried, I could still see everything through my shirt. And I just felt so embarrassed. And I just hated the person I was looking at in the mirror. And I decided at that point, I was like, I need to make a change because, you know, I had pre-diabetes and I did everything I needed to do to make sure my glucose levels were where they needed to be. And to, you know, 3 years later, to just undo all of that really upset me. And it really put me into a depressive cycle. So I started to take charge of my health, and I became a runner, started participating in 5Ks, and I dropped a bunch of weight. And included in that, I changed my eating habits because I knew like it didn't matter how often I ran. I really needed to think of food as fuel, and I needed to really think about how did food play into my decision making, because I think my relationship with food was a result of everything else that was happening in my life. And when I think about like college and how stressful that was and trying to figure out where, you know, I'm about to graduate, so what is my next step? I think about the way I was perceived by friends or potential partners, and just the way I thought about myself and beauty standards. All of that played into what decision am I going to make in terms of like what type of food I'm going to eat. But once I started to move through that, I started to learn how to cook. My mom let me cook when I was little every now and then, but it wasn't until college where I said, okay, I'm going to learn how to make my own salad dressing. I'm going to, I was in South Carolina at the time. So instead of going to Waffle House all the time or Zaxby's, I'm going to, you know, make myself some eggs with some tomatoes and spinach. I'm going to use brown rice and, you know, really think about how could I incorporate fresher ingredients into my diet. And then I started seeing the change. And not only that, but like I thought of food in a way that, hey, like food is fuel. In fact, if I eat better, I run faster. My endurance is better. I think clearer. I have a better attitude about myself. I am less negative in my life. I am attracting the right things to my life. And it was more, and it really became a lifestyle journey. Yeah. And it's a journey that I'm still on. You like, I'm never going to be
always be on it.
Always,
yes, always.
So, and over time, the journey changed. Like I stopped running and I got more into weightlifting, and now I'm a walker because it's the only thing I can do right now during COVID.
So good for you though, and highly underrated as a very effective form of physical movement.
Great exercise.
So good.
And even then, like my weight has gone up and down, but I've never gone back to my heaviest weight, which is I think is a feat for me, especially after I'm 28 now. So it's been about 7 years. I started in 2013, so it's been about 7 years. So I've been able to keep the weight off for 7 years, and I'm like, oh my God, still.
That's sustainable. Yeah, that's beautiful.
It's really sustainable methods of weight loss, and just, understanding like how food makes me feel. And even then, I still call myself an emotional eater. So because triggers can come up in different ways depending on where you are in your life. So I decided to get into nutrition specifically for that reason. And that was about 4 years ago at this point. I think 4 years ago, I was actually applying to grad school. And I was in the environmental sciences, and I decided like that wasn't what I wanted to do. What I wanted to do was to help people reform their own relationships with food, help them ask and confront questions that I think they already have inside of them, but not being afraid to get the answer and then move forward with that, because I think we're so hard on ourselves. But the only way that you're really going to make progress is if you actually love yourself more than anyone else does.
Yeah.
And it's about like thinking, not letting food have power over you, and recognizing the different triggers in your life. And that includes your environment, that includes the people you hang out with, that includes maybe your job. Is your job stressing you out? And also how you're feeling about yourself and the direction your life is going. So I applied to American University, and I really wanted to go to an online program that would allow me to kind of do my work from anywhere. So, and I connected with the administrators there just so quickly, and I loved the mission that they had. Nutrition education is a relatively new degree. Like it's not necessarily nutrition science. Well, it is sort of nutrition science. Like we learned the science of nutrition,
sure.
but we're trained to take the research and put it into a format where we can actually educate people and in real life terms. And while I was in that program, I was diagnosed with diabetes. And after my diabetes diagnosis, like everything I did was about type 2 diabetes. So every paper, every project had some sort of type 2 component related to that, because I started to learn that type 2 was sort of like an epidemic of sorts, like where, it's something that's going to get unfortunately worse as time goes on. But I feel like as nutrition educators, we have a role to play to help people, to meet people where they are first, and understand like what healthy choices can they be making day to day to lower the risk of type 2, or delay it or prevent it in some way, or at least if you have it, try to live as healthy and well as you can. So I know that's pretty long-winded, but
that's great.
Part of the journey. And even now I think about it, like I've been asked this several times, Danielle, which is, do I feel differently because I was diagnosed with type 1 LADA? And I've answered this before, and I still reflect on it. But my answer to that is, the only thing that's different is that I noticed the access that I have to devices that for people with type 2 just isn't available. And I remember when I thought I had type 2, seeing an endo would have cost me hundreds of dollars. Whereas like now, because of my insurance and also because of like how I'm designated, it's not as expensive anymore. And to me, that's really just it makes me more frustrated, because I personally don't feel, I don't really feel different in terms of like type 1 or type 2. If anything, I think the knowledge has help form my perspective a bit more.
Yeah.
But to me, like, no, I think as a person with diabetes and as a nutrition educator, I feel like the fight is just even more important.
I agree. And you said so many things that were so great. And so, I mean, just like it's the similarities, which I didn't know between us, are so parallel. The reason why I got into nutrition and got my degree in nutrition is because I had a dysfunctional binge eating relationship, emotional eating relationship throughout my entire teenage life, also clinical depression, all the whole thing, very similar. And I realized, but I was about 18 or 19, I was like, this is not who I want to be. This is not, I had a mirror moment too, where I was like, who is that person? Like, that does not look like how I feel like I am. And so I kind of learned my way out of my kind of dysfunctional relationship and then began helping other people. But I think that what you said, which is so, so important, is that the way we interact with nutrition is a relationship. And you and I both used to be kind of in an abusive relationship, even though we were kind of the enablers. Like, maybe it was like we have to forgive ourselves for what we didn't know when we didn't know it. But you know, when you learn more and your awareness expands, your habits change. So as a nutrition educator, one of the things for me, I always say, is you have to find something that feels joyful, because if you feel like every step you're taking with your nutrition is a burden, it's like this, like you're just scratching your nails on a chalkboard forever and you're just like fighting back against it the whole time. Of course, that's never going to be sustainable. So for someone who's coming to you looking for that kind of advice, that's like at this point saying, hey, I've tried everything right, which we've all heard before, and I just don't think I can have a functional, joyful, you know, peaceful relationship with nutrition. You know, where do you tell someone like that to start?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think asking them this question, like, okay, well, what about food do you find joyful?
Yes.
What, and also asking yourself, like, who is telling you that you can't feel this joy about food?
Yeah.
Has anyone told you that? And is that true? And when you take joy in a certain food, like, what feeling does that ignite for you? Is it nostalgia, maybe from your childhood? Is it something that you made yourself and you're proud of that? I think there shouldn't be shame around liking food. In fact, I think that the shame around liking food is toxic itself.
I agree.
And I think another thing that you have to ask is it the food, or is it your perception of how other people will think about you enjoying the food? So, and I think I'm using myself as an example because I think weight is an important topic here.
Yeah.
For me who has always been overweight, even sometimes obese, I knew what people thought of me when they saw me indulging in things that I shouldn't have been indulging in. And to me, at that point, I'm like, no, this food does not make or break me. Like, I am not going to quote unquote get diabetes, which were the jokes I heard back then, because I decided to indulge in a piece of cake. I like the cake because it tastes really good. However, if I'm feeling shameful about it, that's only going to feed that guilt. And if my first emotional response is to go back to that piece of cake, that's where the toxicity is.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing, if when someone has come to me and said, hey, I feel like I can't just enjoy food anymore. And I feel like, I have to eat healthy all the time. Well, what's healthy?
Yeah.
And I think that's something that people ask themselves, is this healthy? What does that mean? Like, health and wellness means being able to have the pizza, but also have the salad. Yeah. It means being able to bake cookies or go to a barbecue with your friends and then saying, you know what, I actually love eating fruits and vegetables because fruits and vegetables make me feel good too. It really is about having a holistic relationship with food and not cutting certain things out. When something feels joyous to you, you should indulge in that. But also there's a moment where you have to prioritize other traditionally healthy foods just because you care about the way your health is going to be long term. I would never shame someone for finding joy in the things that make them happy. No. I think I think there's also such a thing as toxic positivity too.
Absolutely.
So I wouldn't be like, yeah, eat everything in the world. Like, don't do that. Strike a balance. But just make sure that you're loving yourself throughout the process. And I think this is also kind of where like cultural competency comes into play, because depending on your background, you may face shame from people who are closest to you, whether they know it or not. And I think it's important to really be resolute in your own judgment. But I think the need to feel validated by the people around you is also, it matters too. But if you're the first or only your family, leading by example may help them, or you may help someone else who identifies with you to come along too.
Yes. And you said, I mean, honestly, listening to you speak, it sounds like everything that I would say. So I'm just kind of like enjoying this immensely. And I think what's so important is about the judgment. And I think that so many people, in my experience, both for myself and coaching people, is that it's the self-judgment that like almost gets worse than anybody else's judgment. It's because, but we don't realize that that self-judgment is informed by all of those other external things that we may not even consciously realize we're allowing to make our decisions for us. And so, yeah, that whole food policing thing, that whole, well, if I'm eating this, and I mean, I remember when I was in school, even with diabetes, I just remember having to go to the nurse's office to drink my juice box or something because I didn't want anybody else looking at me eating. Because I remember it being like, well, why is Danielle eating a snack? And we're here and like people would talk and I'd be like, oh, and then that was informing my shame from like, fourth, third grade, about I should hide my eating because people are making fun of me because I have to eat this. And you don't realize how insidious that can get. And I love the fact that you're asking people questions. That's my favorite part of this. Ask yourself all those questions that Tiara just asked. I would recommend kind of sliding the thing back and writing down all of those questions and genuinely reflecting on them as like a journal entry, as a self-care practice, because you may be shocked out of your mind as to where your beliefs about how you need to eat to be healthy are. And one last thing I'll say is that healthy is something I always talk about. It's not a word that everybody can decide on the same or agree upon the same definition, just like perfect. I always say perfect is like one of the worst words in the world because it's crippling for people because nobody has a standard definition for it. I feel like healthy is the same thing and food really plays into that. So thank you for bringing all of that up. I would say for people that are watching this that are having some sort of like what Tiara just said is like gold for self-exploration. So good. And so talk a little bit more about the preparation of food, if you will, because for me, growing up like you, my mom invited me into the kitchen and that kind of laid a foundation. But I explored that on my own, and now I feel like, for lack of sound, to sound like a woo-woo person, like I find preparing food for myself one of the most spiritual, like connective source, like everything. I feel so connected to myself and everything else on the earth when I'm preparing food for me or for someone I love. And so I didn't always feel that way, and I'm not certain how I even got to that point, but I feel like that's a point that we all would do well to get to. So how do we get, how do you get to that point where, where you are in that state? Because we talked about it off the air about how you feel that same way as well.
Oh my God. So like cooking is like my favorite thing to do. I as an emotional eater, I am proud to say that cooking has helped me reform that relationship. And the reason why is because I am making it. Like my hands are chopping up the vegetables. It's stirring in the pie. It's, tasting, what flavors that I like and what appeals to me. And I think cooking to me is my just best form of creativity. And I think everyone is creative and everyone loves food. I don't think anyone who's watching this is someone who's like, I don't like food, especially, if you have diabetes, you love food. Of course. And I think cooking is such a really great way to explore that. And I think if you're someone who's starting out, especially right now in COVID, like we're all at home. So stress eating is a real thing right now, but also people are learning to cook more often. And I think if you're starting out, start small and start with the things that you like. Yeah. I would say don't try something because you think you should be trying it. It's kind of like what you said, like about should, and like because should has judgment in it. Mm-hmm. Like ask yourself, if you were to go out to your favorite restaurant, what would you be eating right now? And how can you make that at home? Brilliant. So for me, I love burgers. I love them so much, and I'm going to love them forever. But I can't spend all my money at Five Guys because that adds up for a while, and also because I know like that's not going to be good for me and my health. But what I can do is I can go to the grocery store. I can buy a pack of ground beef, and you can decide how lean or fatty you want that beef to be depending on your health goals. And I know I have all the seasonings in my pantry, and I think a lot of people have more in their arsenal than they probably believe. So check your pantry. What's already available to you? And if I want to make that burger, I know I have salt, I have pepper, I have garlic, and I can make the portions as small or as big as I want. If I want French fries, I can either grab some frozen potatoes and pop it in the oven and spray them with some fat-free canola oil and let them bake in the oven and have that be a healthier option. Or if I want to make them myself, I can grab some potatoes and I can chop them up and make them how I want, and also be able to still control that portion sizing. So make what you like and experiment. And that's another thing. You can't be afraid to fail in cooking. I know it's so hard, especially when you're spending your own money. And like I said, it's a pandemic, so a lot of people are trying to save as much as they can. So that's even more reason to just make what you like. Don't waste any time on things that you don't want.
Yeah.
But if there's something that you're interested in exploring, look at a recipe first, and see how they do it. I am not very good at following other people's recipes.
Me neither.
What I look for is a technique instead. So I was just doing something the other day. I was making chicken piccata the other day, and chicken piccata uses like boneless skinless chicken breasts, which is like super dry, especially if you don't know how to make it right. But there is a way to make chicken breast that's super tender and juicy. And one of the ways that you can do that is by butterflying it and making it thinner, or you could pound it and make it thinner. So I look for things like that in recipes to implement into other forms of cooking. Mm-hmm. I would also say, if you're starting out to cook and you want, especially if you want to save, like, there's no shame in getting frozen vegetables, like, because they're frozen at peak ripeness, and they're really cheap. So you can throw that into a salad if you want. You can throw it into some soups, or you can saute them however you like. And also, if you're someone who's starting out cooking for the first time and you're doing it because you want to decrease like the amount of sodium that's in your diet, like, experiment with different types of vinegar, experiment with lemons or limes or other flavor boosters, especially fresh herbs right now. Like, fresh herbs, depending on where you are super cheap, and they just give you a burst of flavor where you don't need as much salt. And then, like, another thing I'll say is to don't try to do too much at once. So if you are trying to cut back on salt or fat, don't try to cut out all at once, because your taste buds aren't used to that right now. It's a process. There's a blog that I used when I first started my health journey. It's called A Black Girl's Guide to Weight Loss. And she had an Erica Nicole Kendall, who runs that site. She had this saying called "Reclaim Your Taste Buds," because she talks about how processed foods have just warped the way that we taste food so much that when you do taste things in a natural flavor, it doesn't register with you. Like,
not right away. Yeah.
Not right away. It's really bland. But when you slowly incorporate that and slowly take out some of that processed material, you actually realize that no, like, it's really good. It's good in its natural form. Yeah. So cut back, but, like, don't try to cut all of it out. Like, give yourself room to get used to this new diet. And then have fun. So, like, I'm pretty sure anyone watching this has a chef or a food TV personality where they're like, I like that person. I want to emulate that person. Emulate that person in the kitchen. I don't even care if you are talking to yourself as if you have your own show. Make it fun for yourself, because honestly, you should be having fun, especially right now in the pandemic. Like, there's room for fun always, especially in the kitchen. And then invite your family to taste it out, especially if you want to post a recipe on the blog. But don't take the pressure off. Choose fresher ingredients, but don't do too much, and eat what you like. Please don't waste your time on things that you're like, I wouldn't eat that if I had to pay for it. If you wouldn't pay for it, then don't.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. You're just a wealth of incredible, fantastic advice and knowledge. I'm just sitting here enjoying every minute of it, because these are all the things that I recommend. And I think it's so important about, like, that word perfection. Like, cooking is not about perfection. It is about creative expression and connection with self. And I call it almost like a demonstration to the powers that be that you love yourself, that you value yourself, that you want to take the time and the love and the energy to focus on that creation of the fuel that you are going to then ingest. Like it really is a very magical experience for me. And I wasn't always this way. This is not, I just didn't like, this is something that was an evolution for me. So hearing you talk about this and the way it's just so similar. And I think it is, for lack of a better term, the best possible way to reform, as you call it, which I love, your relationship with nutrition, because perfection's never going to be the way. And even when I coach people on nutrition, I'm like, we're not going to just upheave your entire situation right away. That would never work. We need to do it little bit by little bit and see what fits. And I hope that people out there will heed your advice, because I think it is so on point. And I wish I had someone telling me this, 20 some years ago when I needed to hear it. So I hope someone out there is hearing it that needed to hear it.
And Daniel, I actually, just one more thing. Because also like cultural competency is also always wrapped in this. And for, listeners who are wondering like, okay, but, in my background, we make things like this and I don't know how to make it healthier. I think it's important to look at the ingredients that you're using. And seeing where you can make substitutes. So if you have a dish that's relatively high in fat because you're using a lot of oil, try to decrease the amount of oil, and maybe try to replace it a little bit with water if you can, or maybe with another flavor booster. If it's something that uses a lot of salt, try to replace that with the other main flavor booster that's in there. So I'll say curry chicken is something that I really like to make. Because I'm part Jamaican, so I like to eat a lot of curry chicken. Typically it has a lot of fat and it has like a lot of salt in it. If I went to go pick it up at a restaurant, but a way I've made it healthier is cutting back on the salt, but adding a little bit more curry powder to it, because curry is such a strong flavor. It's a strong spice. I love it. And instead of using like vegetable oil, I may switch to a healthier oil, or I may just cut back on it. Or may use like in conjunction with the spray. So
that's how I am too with the spray. Yep, that makes a big difference. You use way less.
You use way less, and for people who are afraid to see like a nutrition coach or a dietitian, like understand that we're also not perfect. We also struggle with food sometimes, and it's okay. And a good nutrition educator or health coach or a dietitian, they will meet you where you are, and they will ask you about what progress you want to make and where you feel comfortable starting. So if you're meeting with someone who's taking you on a new health journey, be open about what you're not ready for yet. And I don't care if it's the smallest goal. If it's something that in your heart, like I can do this, even though my coach thinks I can be here, I can only do this. Speak up for this, because you're going to feel good when you can overcome this, and that way you will get to up here. You will, but you got to start here first, and you have to be open about wanting to set smaller goals, going by your pace and not just what your coach wants you to do.
Absolutely. And I think that's a great place to kind of like, that's one of the things I say, someone who's been coaching for 10 years, I always say about not ever talking badly, but if a coach ever says to you, any coach, this is the only way this is going to work, if those words ever come out of a coach's mouth, I would exit. I would like back away, because there is no only way for diabetes. There is no only way for food. There is no only way for one thing, although that might be the way that works for them, and that's fine. As someone who is in a position of coaching, you cannot force feed your positioning on someone else and hope that it works. That's just so yeah. So I don't know. Are you available for coaching? Is that because any links that Tiara has given me? Okay.
I am available for coaching. One person I helped. She's amazing, and she actually has type 2 diabetes, and we met through a show that we watch, and we were talking about her issues with food and how it was just hard for her to meet people. And I remember when we started, she said, I'm thinking about going to this health coaching class, this CrossFit class. And I'm afraid because I haven't worked out in so long and I know I'm out of shape. And one of the things I asked her, I was like, well, do you think that you could just pop in and say hi for a couple of minutes? And yeah, she did. And I mean, she she's still part of the gym now, but now she's doing everything at home. But she's been there for a couple of years.
Yeah.
So it's, you know, it's moments like that where I'm like, yeah, as a health coach, we help facilitate the change, but it's actually you who makes the change happen. And that's what gives us, you know, a lot of pride. And she's come so far, and just the way that she talks about herself, she, you know, she still struggles with anxiety, but she's more open about that. And we still have conversations today about like how she's doing and how she's moving forward. But I can see the change in her, and she's been so empowered, even with her diabetes care. So it's always just so great to see. But I think a good health coach is always, you know, a good partner in that, and that's what we are. We're your partner. Like we're there to support you, not tell you what to do. We give you information, and then, you know, we
Support
present it in this way how you can you know, adjust it into your life. But whatever you say, it goes, and we're just here to support.
Absolutely. It's beautiful. And so, I mean, I work with a lot of other coaches. I don't ever have the mentality, which I don't like in the coaching community, was like, oh, well, I can't promote other coaches. It's like, look, there are billions of people in this world that need health coaching. There's only a very small number of us, and we're not all going to jive with every single person that looks at us. So now that I know you're available for that kind of coaching, I will, you know, have you on my kind of Rolodex in my mind of people that I can, yeah, absolutely. And any links that Tiara gave me and our team will be directly under this. So you can go click out to her website, all that other stuff, and please do it. But before we kind of wrap this up, is there any other thing? I don't want to leave any of your wisdom on the table. I want it all. I want it all.
I would just say that, like, you know, I know we talked a lot about food and like healthy relationships with food, and not as much about diabetes specifically, but this is related.
It's directly related. They go hand in hand.
And even like if you're thinking about other aspects of your diabetes care, like your diabetes care is so individualized. So the lessons that, you know, you may take from this about food, you can still apply that to how you work with your diabetes educator, or your endocrinologist, or your primary care physician, because it's about the advocacy part, and it's about asking yourself, like, what you deserve and what joy you deserve in your life. And I think if you're watching this, you definitely deserve that joy. You really do. And asking yourself, who told you that you're not allowed to enjoy it? And is that true? And I can answer this for you. It's not true. You deserve it. You deserve to live your healthiest life. So please move forward with that. It can be hard on certain days, but, you know, you will get past them. I saw something on Twitter today that said, like, I'm so proud of you for surviving every single bad day of your life. And I saw that. I was like, oh my God, I felt that. I did survive every bad day of my life.
That's right.
And if you're watching this, it's because you have to.
Yeah. Beautiful. I couldn't have said it better myself. So yeah, and I'm just going to back that up. I agree. Every single thing we talked about, although maybe the word diabetes wasn't said 100 times, it couldn't be more directly correlated to your relationship with diabetes. When you start mending your relationship with nutrition, you will automatically begin reforming your relationship with diabetes. There's no way that they don't immediately spill over into the other one. So Tiara, I cannot tell you how much joy interviewing you has brought me. I knew it was going to be great, but it's even better than I expected. And I hope everybody out there enjoyed your major journaling prompts, guys. If you didn't ask all your questions that Tiara just asked you to ask yourself, please, as an act of self-care, as a practice of self-love, go back, grab your notebook, and ask yourself these questions and begin to give yourself that gift, because you do deserve it. We all deserve it. And so, yeah, I hope you enjoyed this interview, and stay tuned for some more amazing ones, and I'll catch you on the next one. Thank you so much, Tiara.
Bye.